City Hall stood tall in the center of the city, made of old stone and wide glass windows that reflected the morning sky. The building had seen many important days, quiet days, and difficult days, and this morning seemed calm like all the others. The sun rose slowly, casting soft light on the wide steps leading to the entrance. Workers arrived early, holding folders, cups and phones, each person moving with purpose and habit. The sound of shoes echoed through the long halls as doors opened and closed. Inside the building, the air felt serious and organized. Walls were lined with portraits of past leaders and framed documents that spoke of laws and history. Security cameras watched silently from above. The front desk workers greeted familiar faces and checked lists on their screens. It was the kind of place where everyone believed rules kept order. A woman named Grace walked toward the entrance with slow and steady steps. She was dressed simply, wearing a dark coat and flat shoes that looked comfortable and clean. She carried a thin folder under her arm. Her face showed calm focus, and her eyes looked straight ahead. She did not rush, and she did not hesitate. She walked like someone who knew where she was going. People noticed her as she passed through the doors. Some glanced for a second and moved on. Others watched a little longer, curious but silent. Grace did not react to the looks. She passed the security check without trouble and entered the main hall. The large space opened around her, filled with light from tall windows and the quiet noise of a working building. Grace walked to a wooden bench near the main chamber and sat down. She placed the folder on her lap and folded her hands over it. She waited patiently, looking around the hall. Her breathing was slow and even. She did not check the time. She did not appear nervous. She simply waited. Across the hall stood a police officer named Tom. He had been assigned to City Hall for many years. He was known for following rules closely and taking his duty seriously. He believed order came from structure and clear lines. That morning, he stood near the entrance, watching people move in and out, making sure everything stayed calm. Tom noticed Grace sitting on the bench. At first, he thought nothing of it. Visitors often waited there. But as time passed, something felt unclear to him. He did not recognize her face, and he had not seen her check in at the front desk. He looked at his tablet again, scrolling through the list of expected guests. Her name was not there. Tom felt a small tightness in his chest. He believed every person inside the building needed proper approval. He adjusted his uniform and began walking toward her. His steps were firm, and his face showed focus. Grace noticed him approaching and looked up. Her expression stayed calm. Tom stopped a short distance away and spoke in a controlled voice. He asked her if she had permission to be inside the restricted area. Grace listened carefully. She stood up slowly, holding her folder close. She replied that she was there for the meeting and that everything was in order. Her voice was steady and polite. Tom did not feel satisfied. He asked her for identification or written approval. His tone remained official. He believed clarity would resolve the situation. Grace shook her head gently. She said she did not have paperwork to show him at that moment. She said there was no mistake and that she was supposed to be there. Tom felt confusion growing inside him. He was not used to unclear answers. He believed rules should be visible and proven. He looked around briefly, noticing a few people slowing down to watch. Tom told Grace that without approval, she would need to leave the area. He pointed toward the exit with a firm gesture. He believed he was protecting the building and doing his duty. Grace did not raise her voice. She did not step back. She simply looked at him and repeated that she was exactly where she needed to be. Her calm response made the situation feel heavier. Nearby staff members began whispering. A woman at the front desk looked over with concern. She checked her computer quickly, then looked again at Grace. Her face showed surprise, but she said nothing. Grace adjusted her coat and stood tall. She held her folder like it contained something important, not just papers but purpose. Her eyes remained calm, showing patience instead of fear. Tom asked her again to leave. His voice was louder now, though still controlled. He believed the situation needed to end quickly before causing disruption. Grace took a slow breath. She replied that she would not leave. She said she trusted that the misunderstanding would be cleared soon. The tension in the hall grew. Footsteps slowed. Conversations stopped. Even the sound of machines seemed quieter. People watched from a distance, unsure of what would happen next. Tom felt pressure building. He reached toward his radio, ready to call for confirmation. He did not want trouble, but he needed clarity. At that moment, the large doors to the main chamber remained closed, and the meeting had not yet begun. Grace continued to stand calmly, waiting with quiet confidence. The morning that had started like any other now felt different. Something important was about to unfold, though no one yet understood how deeply this moment would change the room. The hall felt different now, as if the air itself had become heavy and slow. People who were walking earlier had stopped or moved very carefully, trying not to draw attention. Some staff members stood near the walls pretending to read their phones while quietly watching. Others whispered softly, their eyes moving between Grace and Tom. Grace remained standing near the bench. Her posture was straight and steady. She did not show anger or fear. Her calm presence seemed stronger than the tension around her. She held her folder close, not as a shield but as something familiar that grounded her. Tom stood facing her, feeling the pressure of many eyes. He had handled difficult situations before, but this one felt strange. Nothing about Grace suggested trouble. Yet his training told him that uncertainty could not be ignored. He believed rules existed to prevent problems before they grew. Tom spoke again, asking her name for official record. His voice sounded firm, but inside he felt unsure. He expected resistance or frustration. Instead, Grace answered calmly and clearly. She gave her name without hesitation. She did not add titles or explanations. Her voice remained even and respectful. The simplicity of her response made Tom pause. Tom typed the name into his tablet. He searched carefully, checking different sections of the system. For a moment, nothing appeared. His chest tightened again. He wondered if there was an error in the system. Behind him, a few workers exchanged looks. One man shook his head slightly, as if sensing something important was being missed. A woman near the front desk stood up and leaned forward, trying to see the screen on Tom's tablet from a distance. Grace waited quietly. She did not step closer or move away. She looked around the hall, noticing the tall pillars, the flags, and the quiet faces watching her. She had been in places like this before. She understood how power often hid behind walls and rules. Tom cleared his throat and asked again why she was there. He said the meeting area was restricted and only approved guests could remain. His words sounded rehearsed, like lines he had spoken many times. Grace replied that she was there for the meeting scheduled that morning. She said her presence had already been confirmed through official channels. She did not speak with pride or demand. She spoke with certainty. Tom felt a growing conflict inside him. Part of him wanted to trust her confidence. Another part reminded him that trust without proof could cost him his job. He glanced toward the inner offices, wondering if someone would step in. The whispers grew louder. A few people began to move closer, drawn by curiosity and concern. The quiet order of City Hall was starting to bend under the weight of the moment. A senior staff member walked quickly toward the inner office doors. Her face showed urgency. She spoke quietly to someone inside, then looked back toward Grace with wide eyes. She nodded once and hurried away. Grace noticed the movement but did not react. She had learned long ago that patience often spoke louder than argument. She waited, breathing slowly, her expression steady. Tom raised his radio and asked for guidance. He explained the situation briefly, choosing his words carefully. He said there was a woman inside the hall whose name did not appear on the guest list. He waited for a response. The radio crackled softly. The voice on the other end sounded unsure and asked him to stand by. Tom lowered the radio and looked at Grace again. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Tom saw no challenge there. He saw calm awareness. It unsettled him more than anger would have. Grace broke the silence by saying that she understood his responsibility. She said she respected his role. She added that sometimes systems failed to show the full picture. Her words were not sharp. They were thoughtful. Some people nearby felt a strange shift in the room, as if the situation was moving towards something important. Tom felt his face grow warm. He did not like being uncertain in front of others. He took a small step back, creating space between them. He told her again that he needed her to wait while the matter was checked. Grace nodded and returned to the bench. She sat down slowly and placed the folder on her lap again. Her hands rested calmly on top. She looked forward, waiting. The hall remained quiet but tense. People pretended to return to their work, though no one truly focused. Everyone sensed that this was no longer a small misunderstanding. Tom stood near her, watching the doors to the main chamber. He wondered why the situation had not been resolved yet. He wondered who she truly was. Minutes passed slowly. The sound of footsteps echoed from the inner hallway. Several officials began to gather near the large doors. Their faces were serious. One of them looked directly at Grace, and then quickly away. Tom noticed this and felt a sudden shift in his chest. Something was wrong, or rather something was about to be revealed. Grace remained seated, calm and patient, as the moment approached that would change the meaning of everything that had happened so far. The hall slowly returned to its usual rhythm after the meeting ended, but the feeling inside City Hall had changed forever. People walked more quietly now, thinking deeply about what they had witnessed. The air felt lighter, yet full of meaning. Conversations happened in low voices, filled with reflection rather than noise. Grace gathered her folder and stood up from her seat near the front table. Her presence had been calm during the entire meeting, and it remained the same as she prepared to leave. Officials nodded respectfully as she passed them. Some smiled softly. Others looked thoughtful, as if learning something new about the world and themselves. Tom stood near the exit where he had been assigned earlier. His posture was straight, but his expression was different from before. His shoulders felt heavier, not from duty but from understanding. He replayed the morning in his mind, each moment clear and sharp. Grace walked toward the door with steady steps. When she reached Tom, she paused. The space between them felt quiet and respectful. Tom looked at her, unsure of what to say. Grace spoke first. She thanked him for doing his job. Her voice was calm and sincere. She said that keeping order was important, but listening was just as important. Her words were simple, but they stayed in the air like truth. Tom nodded slowly. He felt something shift inside him. He apologized again, this time not out of fear, but out of growth. He said he would remember this day for the rest of his career. Grace acknowledged his words with a gentle nod. There was no pride in her expression. There was no need for it. She had nothing to prove. She walked out of City Hall as the doors opened wide. Sunlight poured in, touching the floor and the steps outside. People outside waited, unaware of the lesson that had just unfolded inside. Inside the building, conversations slowly returned to work, but the tone had changed. Staff members spoke with more care. Leaders paused before making decisions. Something unseen had settled into the walls. Tom returned to his post, standing tall but thinking deeply. He realized that authority without understanding could create harm even when intentions were good. He promised himself to ask more questions before making assumptions. Throughout the day, word of the event spread quietly. It was not shared as a moment of embarrassment, but as a moment of learning. People spoke about Grace with respect and admiration. Grace continued her work beyond that building. She met with leaders, spoke to communities, and listened more than she spoke. She believed leadership was not about being seen, but about making space for others to be seen. Days later, City Hall welcomed visitors again. The same benches stood in the same places. The same portraits lined the walls. Yet something was different. People looked at one another longer. They listened more carefully. Tom noticed it too. He greeted visitors with a calmer voice. He watched not just for rules, but for understanding. He had learned that respect was not automatic, but intentional. Grace's visit became a quiet story passed from one person to another. It reminded people that positions did not define worth, and that dignity did not require announcement. City Hall continued to stand tall in the center of the city, but now it carried a new kind of strength. Not the strength of stone and law, but the strength of awareness and respect. And somewhere beyond its walls, Grace walked forward, steady and focused, knowing that change often began in the quiet moments where patience met truth.